All right.
In chat.
So Michelle, let me tee you up. Hey, we have an upcoming webinar. We'll put it with very awesome Chip, Buck, and we'll have Matt Lee. We're going to be talking about application software security. We're going to be talking about some of the CIS controls and all of this, how it relates to the recent national what they call the natty strategy, and the Biden administration came out, as well as then Jen Easterly from CISA just literally a week later. And obviously, I think Executive Director Wales had some insight on that during his conversation with us at Right of Boom, because he certainly alluded to the fact that software companies are going to be looked at to put in more security baked into their solutions. So but I'll put this in there along with it. This is CIS Control 16 from the Cybercast that has the co-hosts of that are Phyllis Lee, who is the controls expert at CIS. She runs controls, and then Ryan Weeks and Wes Spencer. So all the controls are up there so far. This is 16. We'll get through 18 in total, and then we'll do a little pivot because we like to rib the folks at CIS because they're good friends and tell them they have no respond and recover functions. So then we'll pull in some of the NIST framework into that and continue on some other journeys post that as well. Do we have Jim yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
We do. Jim, good to see you.
Good to see you. I see you're rocking the new SAS shirt there.
Yeah, although I am, vertically challenged, Jim. So I'll have to get like a step stool or something so people can see it, or lower my standing desk to waist height or something.
I've got the same problem, Andrew.
I thought I was starting to get like a little bit dizzy there, Chip. I thought we were going to do some virtual cam going on there with you. All right. So in kicking things off, Chip, do you and Leron have any thoughts on the product side? Anything come in interesting recently? Any updates or notes that you guys want to share, or feedback you want to ask about?
Well, I think Leron is going to use this opportunity to introduce one of our product managers and let her take the team through an upcoming modification on the MFA report side. So okay. I won't steal any thunder and offer anything other than that.
Very cool.
Thanks, Chip. So we've been working on an additional MFA report. So many of you are familiar with our Microsoft MFA report, and those folks that have organizations that are Google organizations have been asking us, well, what about us? When are we going to get an MFA report? So I've asked Amanda to share our MFA report. Some of you have communicated with Amanda, whether via email or in meetings. So I'll take the opportunity now to formally introduce Amanda. She is a product manager for Respond reports as well as events. So she covers a lot of ground. And without further ado, I will hand the floor over to Amanda.
Thanks, Leron. Hi, everyone. So as mentioned, I'll be showing the Google MFA report. So let me share my screen. You guys should all see the reports module now. Yes. So when you navigate to reports, and then at the bottom of the screen, you'll now see there's another badge here that indicates the Google Workspace is available for your MFA settings report. When you select the report, you're now going to have the opportunity to pick which application you're running the report for. So instead of it just being only Microsoft, you have the option to choose. You select G Suite, select the organization. Disclaimer, this is dev, so limited data and some things that might seem a little out of order for you guys, but should show us enough data that we want to see for running the report. So you press run report and you'll see now that here's the data available to you. So just similar to the MFA report for Microsoft, it starts with the account, obviously, and then scroll across the screen towards the right, and you'll see the rest of the columns for that account. So here, we start with the MFA status, whether or not it's enforced, password strength, whether or not less secure apps access is enabled or not, admin status, and last updated. And you can filter by these different fields you can see here. And you'll get your color coding for things that are less preferential will be red, more preferential will be green, indicating that someone's kind of going with the policy that you'd like to enforce.
Leron, is that a stronger Kelly green for tomorrow that I'm picking up there, or is that just?
Good point, Andrew. I forgot about that. Yeah, in order to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, we, from the very beginning, when we built the application, decided to go with this green color. Yeah, it is Kelly green.
Wow. Anyone need me for graphics? I would sorely disappoint you. So, all right. Anything else you guys want to go through on the product side, Leron?
So the Google MFA report will be out by the end of the quarter. And if anybody has any feedback or anything else they'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear it. We're also working on enhancing our Microsoft report, since it can be a little bit confusing. So that's also coming once we release the Google MFA report.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Let's see Carl Full James. Carl, how are you? How is BC treating you these days?
Pretty good. Just a little under the weather, so staying quiet.
Sorry to hear it, man. I hope you're feeling better soon.
Thanks. Just a sore throat.
We do have Ryan. Ryan, or sorry, let me finish. Chip, any other things, or Leroy?
No, just, I would love to talk about all the interesting things that we're doing, but you've already heard it before. I don't want to sound like a broken record. We're working on some big things. Jim is going to have some announcements later on in the year that he's already discussed. So the team is really busy on working on those big items and doing everything we can to ensure that we deliver those items on time, while at the same time adding small enhancements like the MFA report, adding new events and things like that.
And doing some small governance work, Chip, right? Like on your ISO standards and things like that don't take much time.
I was going to say, I wouldn't describe those as small.
He had a smile on his face when he was saying it, Chip. He was being sarcastic.
I know. I saw that the tongue was literally inserted in the cheek, and he managed to get it out without fumbling any words. So, yeah, they're taking up a lot of our time. But the good news, I think, for our partner community on that is our push toward ISO is really having us go through a very regular cadence of self-examination and improving our own processes, our internal security, really taking a deep dive and a fine-tooth comb through every single thing that we do. So it's making us a much stronger, tighter company. I think a lot of our team members aren't necessarily reacting to that so well. They're facing the same kind of struggles with us enforcing much tighter policies across everything, whether it's just process requests for new products that we want to use on down to how our own people authenticate our own stuff. One of the things that we're going to be moving toward to really enhance security on our dev side is moving beyond our password, our centralized password management and OAuth for our development environment, and moving all of our engineers to hardware keys to tighten things down even further. So we're making a lot of progress to really strengthen the overall muscles of Sassler's internal security.
It's great to hear. I mean, this is our industry in general is lagging behind. And so it's great to see companies like yours, Chip, and a few others kind of set the bar. It's good to see. And I think we'll see a lot more of kind of things like BSIM eventually become standards and that our organizations in our space are going to start to adhere to, and just secure coding principles that are going to be sorely needed, and probably, if the government has their way, probably starting to become more mandated.
Yeah, we've been in touch with BSIM and begun working with them. I think that will also be in the future of SASI Alerts as an organization is formally joining the BSIM group. We've already modeled our, really not knowing all that much 6 months ago about BSIM, but we've already modeled much of our development practices across what their best practices are recommended, and we've done that organically. So it's going to be a really easy transition for us, but we're going to formally join BSIM.
That's awesome. Offline, I'll talk to you. I know the guy that was the founder, and Jim Manico knows quite a bit about it too. So we'll get you in touch with those guys if and when you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, Ryan, anything new on customer success side?
A couple little things. Well, first of all, the big one, and I'm sure we've mentioned it a few times and we went over it last week. If you guys haven't touched the SASI report yet, look for that email Michelle sent out for just, I think, yesterday or the day before. It has a link to it. Super valuable information. A couple of our partners have leveraged it to go ahead and just go from selling this as a line item to actually saying like, hey, this is the stuff that we're seeing out there. These are the guys that are surfacing it. So we're going to go ahead and implement this. You would be remiss if you didn't leverage what we gave you in that platform. The other thing is I worked with Liran a bit yesterday on our little news board for suggestions and recommendations that you guys have. And we're at a point now where we would like to involve some of the folks here from this community and give you the ability to upvote the ones that are most important to you. If you're interested in being a part of that, if you can reach out to your account manager, whether it's Alex, Connor, or Dana, and let them know you're interested. We have to invite you to it because we've got some pretty clear things that it looks like you guys would be interested in seeing. We want your input, but we do kind of want to keep it behind a wall so that we can speak candidly with one another. So if you're open to helping us out and taking a look at what some of your your peers have recommended or suggested or requested and throw your weight behind them, please let us know and we'll invite you to join.
Very cool.
And
good.
Andrew, I was just going to say, Liran alluded to some announcements later in the year, which obviously we'll make at that point. But for those that haven't signed up yet, maybe Michelle can put this in the chat. We are having a launch event for the next big module in SASI Alerts called Unify. So if folks haven't seen that in the newsletter yet, or any of our stuff, there's an opportunity just for partners only. This is only if you have users on our platform with us. We are doing this launch event specifically for you on the 19th of April to show you the functionality that we have ready for you. And we're not announcing that until we're announcing that to the entire universe the following week. But I just want to make sure everyone knows about that. We now have the launch. We now have the sign up page for that launch event. So I want to make sure people know about that.
I just dropped it in chat. So go for
Awesome.
it.
And then Phil put something in. Phil, it's in small print, but do you want to talk about that at all? It says question.
Yeah. So just this week, we started using SASI Alerts. We've only been using it for about 10 days now. And we got this alert that a user had logged on from outside the approved locations. It was down in Israel, actually. And we investigated and we talked to some of the people in SASI Alerts already. And basically what actually transpired was the user went to a website that was hosted in Israel, and they logged on to the website using their Google credentials. And lo and behold, it generated the alert that somebody had logged on from outside Canada. And so the question really is there a way to separate this sort of normal use, people logging onto a website outside the country? Is there a way of separating that from the event when somebody, an intruder, gains access to the user's account?
Yeah, so Phil, that's a great question, and it's dependent. How that user's location is reported by us is dependent upon what the underlying product returns as the IP address that was used for the authentication. I'm definitely familiar with that specific incident because I've reviewed it with our support team. And that's the first time we've actually seen, and this was, if I remember correctly, this was a G Suite user. It's the first time that I've seen that behavior where the IP address that came back to us through the API was the address of the web product itself. I wouldn't mind following up with you afterwards. I don't know if you've investigated that particular product. I wasn't able to find any validation, any confirmation that product is actually hosted out of Israel. They host their product on Amazon, but I couldn't find anything specific to Israel. And in fact, what I did find was that they state in their on their site, on their their detailed info about their products and where they're hosted, that everything is hosted in the U.S. So I think we need to do a little follow-up with that and see if there's something deeper going on. I doubt there is. Just knowing the brand that we're talking about, I don't think it's appropriate to disclose it to everybody necessarily on the call. They are a big brand, big international brand. So it's entirely possible that they just haven't updated their website to that. But they specifically did not list Israel as one of their hosting areas, which I found interesting.
Yeah. So yes, I would like to work with you to delve into this deeper. And I don't know what else we can do to help you, but with the I think SASI Alerts has access to more information than we do. But yeah, let's follow up afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. And thanks for bringing that up, Phil.
I have a question regarding that to Chip, I guess, or
sure, Scott.
Jim. I'm glad that was on video. I have blacklisted countries that I would definitely not want. And I added Vietnam from your reports. Because they don't try and fail, they try and succeed.
Right,
based on the
exactly.
reports. They actually make it. I'm like, wow, north or south? And it doesn't specify. So all of Vietnam. Checked my clothing. But is it negligent in any way? I don't want to think. Is it short-sighted to just blacklist the countries that we're aware are problem solvers outside of our area versus only whitelist the US and maybe areas that you think, because of all the VPN activity, because of incidences like this? Like Israel, a lot of our software comes from Israel. And I would think, and they're our ally, not that there aren't bad actors, but I wouldn't think of making Israel a flag. But is that naive? I don't mean Israel specifically, but countries that are our allies that could host a VPN, but you get the question.
Yeah. So when you talk about blacklisting, I assume you're talking about the actual product they're using. I'll use 365 as the example. So you're taking the information that you catch in SASI Alerts and you're saying, you know what, I'm going to apply a conditional access rule to prevent access from this country. Is that what you're stating?
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's naive, and I don't think it's an overreaction to do that. We have a intermediate range project underway. When I say intermediate range, I mean third quarter, fourth quarter for SASI Alerts, where we're actually going to provide you guys the ability to set up conditional access rules automatically based upon the bad actors that we see in SASI Alerts to try and make that very thing easier. So I definitely don't believe it's naive to do that. Countries that are allies aren't necessarily, safe places to whitelist or to ignore. And I'll harken back to, I think it was a comment in last week's SASI reports that one of our partners from the UK added into the chat that they see a ton of activity of unapproved access attempts or even successes coming from the US to the UK. In fact, that's their number, the US is the number one origin of problems for people in the UK, which I found a very interesting comment. So what makes this really challenging for all of us is that VPNs are so cheap and accessible to everybody, and hackers use them like crazy. We've caught a number of instances recently, in particular the very high profile one with this Chinese spy ring that Jim has talked about a couple weeks ago, and one of our partners was involved in that. Hackers are generally thoughtful enough to try and figure out where the business is located. And once their automated scripting that probably occurs from their own country has caught a set of credentials that they can use for unauthorized access, they're going to go to that website and they're going to find out where the home country is, and they're going to start accessing it from that home country using a VPN. This is one of the reasons why we have the threat score in SASI alerts that show and defines right in the telemetry of the geolocation data whether or not the IP address is a known VPN, because it's that big of a problem, and it's a thorny one to sort out. I acknowledge that straight up front. I'm not thrilled with the way our threat scores are performing. They throw a threat flag at a lot of things that it's a legitimate threat flag because of the overall use of the ASN. If everyone's familiar with that term, the block of IP addresses that's assigned to a company has what's called an ASN number behind it. And so the easiest, for instance, and you've probably all seen this in SASI Alerts environment if you are using the UI, is almost all of Microsoft IP addresses come back with a high threat score, because the way the threat score operators work is they're looking at who the owner of the ASN is. And there's so many hackers that use temporary virtual machines at Azure to go out and do their bad work that they become flagged, and Microsoft's entire ASN is now recognized by the threat score community as a 100% bad actor threat. And we all know that can't possibly be true, right? Like, not every IP address in the Microsoft universe is a bad actor. And nevertheless, they all come back with a very high threat score. So there's some more details for us to try and figure out, and we're happy to help you guys with that. But to answer your question straight up, I absolutely would use the intelligence that you're getting from SASI alerts on where bad actors are hitting. And unless your customers have a very specific need to access from there, I absolutely would use conditional access to block access from those territories. Definitely would.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, I've had a lot of partners share this type of feedback and insight with us. And as Chip sort of alluded to, we are looking at going beyond the way that we do things today with just country whitelisting, right? Because you whitelist the United States, that's 330 million people, right? So we're going beyond that, and we're analyzing how can we look at user behavior and throw additional alerts. So I mentioned last week things like impossible travel. User logs in from Boston, 7 minutes later, user logs in from Knoxville, Tennessee. That's like 1,000 miles away. We're thinking that should probably be a medium alert to tell you, hey, this happened. I've mentioned this to another partner who's like, oh no, don't tell me you're doing impossible travel. It's impossible to do impossible travel. And I think we just have to approach it intelligently and take it slowly and evaluate the data that we're getting back. So for instance, we also know that Microsoft, for whatever reason, may decide to synchronize your Iowa customer with servers in the EU. And that's going to throw Ireland, outside approved location, all over the place. So we also need to factor in some intelligence beyond simply the impossible travel and filter things out, like when Microsoft or Google are doing internal synchronizations to give you the most meaningful alerts, such as, hey, Scott logged in from Boston and then 7 minutes later is in Tennessee. Take a look at that. That is abnormal to us.
Chip.
Yeah, and to follow up on that a little bit, the way SASI Alerts reports impossible travel scenarios today, we are not doing it based upon a mileage or distance or time. What we look at is the number of IP addresses that a user is logging into a specific application from, and we throw our alerts based upon, okay, we have more than two IP addresses that 365 is being hit at within a 30-minute period. So that's a specific alert we already have. For your customers who have more advanced licensing, so business premium or E3, E5, they will get impossible travel alerts directly from Microsoft. It's based upon Microsoft's AI. We also pass those through directly in SaaS alerts. We bring them, but not everybody has them. So that's why Liron and one of our most senior engineers and I have been discussing for quite some time whether or not we should attack this problem. The difficulty is that geolocation information becomes really sketchy the more narrow you get. Like you guys can see in our map when you drill into, let's say you drill into one of those green dots in Manhattan that has 35 events in it, and you'll start drilling in and you'll see that those dots are spread out on individual street corners or streets all over the place. Sometimes that information is really accurate and sometimes it's not. And that's the real challenge for us in coming up with a meaningful impossible travel component. I think we've arrived at the conclusion that it's important enough for us to make that kind of logic available to the business basics of the world and people who are using other products that don't even have any impossible travel built in, that we're going to do it. And we're just going to have to work together as a partner community and a SaaS alerts to sort out, what's the value? Where do we want to put that in terms of an alert? Is it a medium? Is it critical? Is it low level? We're all going to have to look at the noise that comes back from that that's generated by false geolocation information. Hopefully, it's a very small number. It's under 5% that's incorrect geolocation information. But we're really not going to know that until we launch that product on the world. And I think we'll make a beta available to partners to volunteer for before we just bring that online in general.
And
Chip, go ahead, Leon.
Yeah, just to add to that, right, as Chip alluded to, like IP data is imperfect. We try to source the best possible IP data that we have, but at the same time, we recognize that like you're at a customer site, IP data says Spain, you're in LA, you're on the IP, you know that it's incorrect. So as part of this entire piece that we're tackling, we're plan to also tackle this concept of correcting the IP addresses so that partners can tell us. We need to come up with the right process, right, to make sure that we're not just destroying our IP address geolocation database, but we're also working on a process to allow our partner community to correct bad IP addresses so that you may get the false flag one time, you contact our team, we make the correction, you won't see it again.
Well, actually, we already have that process in place where a partner can contact our support team and tell us, and sorry, Andrew, we're not going to let you get a word in edgewise, Andrew, for the rest of the time after that tongue-in-cheek comment you made earlier. So, a partner can contact our support team now and say, hey, look, I know that this address is not in Spain, it's in LA, and here's how I can validate it and prove it. We do update our information manually based upon that. What Liron is talking about is us designing an automated approval process so that you guys can just add the IP somewhere in the UI or tag it so that you don't even have to go through the process of sending a ticket.
Yeah.
Okay,
Andrew.
No, well, Andy's had his hand up forever.
We were trying to say the same thing, Jim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that Andy. Got it.
I'm sorry. Thank you for allowing me to ask the question. One of the things that I'm getting is that from your perspective, there are so many different alerts that we need to be sensitive to as security partners with our customers. And each of us has a different customer base and they all operate slightly differently. What I'm hearing, and I'm asking this question, is to help us create elements for behavior modeling that we could then implement as part of a security package around cloud for our customers. For, if I think about a medical practice, a clinic, or a hospital, they each have different profiles. And what instead of having SaaS alerts say, I'm going to solve all of this, give us elements and help us build a security behavior or alerting behavior with and response program where we can build these elements uniquely tailored to a particular customer and allow us to have these SOPs to respond to those based on the customer's preference. That behavior modeling, I think, has real value in the marketplace.
Yep. So Andy, I think that's a very good point. It's why for anyone that's been on our platform for more than a year, certainly there are a few guys on here that I think go back into our beta universe. We've added a lot of tools to allow you to fine tune noise, everything from suppressions to individual whitelisting to the individual file triggers. All that stuff was designed to help fine tune some of the noise. But the really powerful tool, and I see Ben popped on camera, I'll bet you he knows where I'm going with this already. The most powerful tool you've got is actually Respond itself. I know I've said this once before on one of our calls, but it's a lot of work to do the following, and we wouldn't expect every partner to do it. But the ultimate way to tune SaaS alerts for each individual customer would actually be to set all of the default settings for our 240 some alerts to low, and then build your own Respond rules around them on a customer by customer basis. You could absolutely do that. It would allow you to hyper customize SaaS alerts for each individual client, not just business sector, and build a profile for exactly what is relevant and important to that client. So, that now you're talking about the kind of effort that it takes to fine tune, a SIM that's tracking multiple or even hundreds of devices behind a corporate firewall, including the firewall itself. So it's a lot of work to do that. And we're trying to find, we're not trying to find, we hope we've found the middle ground that allows an MSP who can pretty much run with a generic set of observations and event creation that we make, all the way to the other extreme where someone can say, you know what, I'm going to customize every single customer, every single tenant that I have according to the specific rules that I build into Respond. Because what Respond allows you to do is create new events based upon any activity that you want.
And Charles, I'm grateful for this feedback. What I was really attempting to get to is I perceive that a lot of us aren't as detailed and security minded as your experience set is lending itself to convey. And that if we had a community or a resource that we could go into and say, here's a alert setting and Respond that goes along with this type of behavior and we could create these behavior profiles for a type of customer or industry, we might be able to go from having everything be low to having this be one profile set that we're going to deal with and say, this is why we're doing this. And if we aren't aware or something new gets added, you help us go to a place where we can say, how does this feature get properly implemented into our customer profile for monitoring and Respond?
Can I say something, Chip, on this?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll retract my earlier statement if you'd like.
No, you don't have to. We deserved it.
So Andy, you're bringing up a really interesting point on a few things that were said here. And Jim, this could be a great either webinar, workshop, regional event, or pre-day event at like Write a Boom. And that is combining threat modeling, right? Because really what you're talking about, Andy, is by, when you say by vertical, by customer, you're talking about by industry. And when you look at threat actors, how MITRE classifies them as an example, and then their TTPs, their tactics, techniques, and procedures, you'll certainly see commonalities. And so I was thinking the other piece, Chip, I'd love first maybe Jim's thoughts, but then Chip, I'd love yours, because it's not just, the necessarily the alerts, right? You mentioned the other thing, which is conditional access, and it made me think about Bo Bullock, right? And how a threat actor thinks externally based on, because again, it's two things, right? The threat actors, not just two things, right? We think about creds, right? That's how they attack, or misconfiguration, right? And Chip, maybe just a comment or two, if you would, on, when we do start doing conditional access, one of the things people forget about a lot about what happens when they start messing around with that also. And because misconfiguration is a huge way in which attackers are gaining access. So comments maybe
Jim,
on
did you
all
have a
those
comment on
pieces?
Or I
My only
jump in?
comment before Chip, you go, will be that one of the things I'm working with Ryan on is we're going to put a survey out to all of our partners, understanding where the gaps are in what people understand about the platform itself, right? Like, so Andy, you have the ability to do that today. So, right? But
Yeah,
you
and
didn't
I'm
know
not-
that. But you didn't
No,
know
I'm
that.
I'm trying to say that each of us have a genius with SAS alerts as it evolves. And if we have a place where we could share this genius and say, this is how it can be applied, and have the ability to import that into our specific offerings, this is where the community begins to feed itself and nurture itself. And that's what I'm attempting to raise here.
Right. So we're going to understand where the gaps are in understanding, right? And then initially put out, essentially fill those gaps, right? Making sure that people like yourself that want to do something, okay, you can already do it in the platform. This is how you do it, right? Feed the community with that, and then essentially allow people to add more to it. And then that's where it will start building on itself. We need a baseline, I guess, is what I'm saying. We'll create the baseline. We'll immediately, fill the gaps, and then we'll count on the rest of you to be able to do that, because I guarantee you that Chip answered the question, but I guarantee you Ben Jones would have been able to answer the same question the same exact way, because he's in our community and he's in Respond like all the time.
Is there a Slack or Discord, as Ben has alluded to here, that we could participate in or could be moderated?
Yeah, so at the opening of the call, Andy, that's we've set up a community board, community.sasalerts.com, that we're going to allow any of you, particularly on this call, who would wish to be invited into that, to join that. We've set that up for multiple purposes. One is to offer your enhancement suggestions and upvote, downvote those enhancement suggestions. But we can certainly evolve that into effectively like a Discord or a Slack channel or a Reddit thread, however you would want to look at it, where you guys can horse trade information. I mean, we think that's I think that's the strength of any product group, is that the partners come to the product with their own ideas.
Great. And I'm just saying, in addition to us going to you, having the ability to interchange concepts. Hey, for example, has anyone encountered how to handle this type of situation? And have it be community fed and build up a library of here's responses. And I'm using response to mean respond to certain situations that have been fruitful or problematic. And then we can use that as a feedback loop as well to you guys.
So one thing I just want to add in here is that, Andy, we're kind of going in the direction that you're talking about, in the sense that after many conversations, right, and examining a lot of data, we had a partner basically ask, or one of our, actually Mike, who's on this call, said something like, hey, since we know when an auth failure occurs, we know on the Microsoft side whether it's an MFA failure or a standard password failure. And I think that an MFA failure it has more weight to it, right? If someone has the password and you see 27 failed MFA attempts, that should be its own alert. So we're going to create our own alert with that. And then what we're going to do with it is also release a respond template with that alert that basically says, we'll give you the baseline, right? So if you have 3 MFA failures followed by a single successful authentication, then that would suggest malicious behavior, right? Your standard user is not going to fail MFA 3 times. But because it's a respond template, Andy, if you feel that that number should be 10 or 1 or whatever you want, you can then deploy that template as you wish. So that's kind of the direction that we're going in.
Okay, so Andrew, back to you had posed a question around conditional access, and this kind of harkens back to the discussion you and I had earlier in the week about the SASI report and the core report that came out. It seems very, very few businesses are using conditional access as a tool. And I think it's because Microsoft makes it kind of difficult to use, right? For those of you guys who use it, you already know you have to create a policy, then you have to apply the policy to individual users or groups. And the whole conditional access process is kind of clunky. On the flip side, Microsoft has security defaults as an option. And both of these things apply to newer tenants, and it depends upon licensing. Some people don't have access to conditional access, so they have to use security defaults. A lot of customers don't use Microsoft security defaults. As soon as you turn conditional access on, you automatically turn conditional or security defaults off. And I don't know if everyone's aware of that. You probably are, because if I remember correctly, Microsoft actually warns you about that. Or maybe I've just read so many TechNet articles that it's ingrained in my head, and I think it's there. But you can't use both things simultaneously. And if you have older tenants, they might not have access to either. So, this is a real challenge in the Microsoft universe, and plays back into something that Liran has discussed previously that we're working on, which is, allowing SaaS alerts to standardize your tenants by you picking a configuration style that you want, and pushing that configuration style out to any or all or selected tenants that you want to have moving forward. And we brought on a new developer specifically to work on this project. So that one's coming fast, actually. Fast for me is, a few months from now. And that will help, I think, a lot in terms of reducing the exposure, the threat footprint that you've got by just standardizing across all of the tenant environments with either conditional access rules and custom policies, or going with Microsoft security defaults.
Yeah, I love it. Michelle, if you could, I know we have a poll, but maybe we just put a yes for we'd love it, or no, but I gotta believe if you could manage your M365 configurations in one place and have a standard yes or no, you'd love that. Be able to say, this is our core security settings across the board for our customers. Yeah, that's what Carrie.
Yeah, I didn't even think
Carrie said what I thought everybody would be thinking, Chip and Jim, right there.
Yeah. Anybody who thinks that's a bad idea, please raise your hand and yell Andrew Morgan.
Yeah. I want to talk to that person. Because it's a tough one. It's a really challenging one, but it's also, I think, not only is it great hygiene for your customers, but in terms of you ever being audited, like, hey, how do you do, certain things in the cloud? This is going to be a great enabler from SaaS alerts to you. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, and Andrew, one of the things that I don't know if people understand about the way our product is architected, we actually did the hard stuff first, right? Like one of the geniuses of Chip, he'll never say in his own, is that when he designed the architecture for SaaS alerts, he did it based off of knowing that there was going to be so many different API calls going back and forth that we needed to architect something that had never been done before in this industry. So he turned to other industries, and the industry he looked at was actually the phone ecosystem, right? The smartphone ecosystem, all the games that people play on their smartphones, because that was the architecture that essentially was going to be scalable enough to handle all of the real-time alerting that goes on in SaaS alerts. There's other products out there that can update in 4 hours or 8 hours, but we do it in real time. And that's the hard part. We can do the snapshots, right? And that's why Chip says now, within a few months, we'll be able to do the configuration, the policy stuff, because we've already done the hard stuff.
Awesome. Okay, Jim, let's turn to we might have to go into this next week. We talked about the SASI report, and when I looked at the SASI report, by the way, has everybody gotten a chance to take a look at it? Have you used it? Just maybe again a Y for versus N in chat. One of the things I wanted to do is provide folks, and you guys started to allude to this, Jim, insights on how to use this in your prospecting and your sales calls. And so I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a fireside chat, if you will, and I'll share a document here with everybody to see, but a chat with you and Chip, and then collectively everybody here. So again, this isn't, I'm hoping this isn't just one, three-way conversation with us. This is, I built some enablement, hopefully for you all to use. So Michelle, do you want to put out that poll too? Do we have a poll handy?
I always have a poll handy. There you go.
Okay, so we asked our prospects questions about how they see IT supporting their business, specifically defined around the process of how they make money, protect their intellectual property and customer data. So that's kind of take a second, yes, no on that, and we'll get a poll. But after you answer that, it'll go away, and I won't answer it to taint any of the results for you there, Michelle. But what I wanted to do is get into the perspective of, okay, we gathered all this great data, and simultaneously I started to look at these other reports, and I have to give, it's going to sound like I'm a fanboy of Chip and Jim and Liron and all the stuff they're doing here. But when you look at their data, just go look at like a CrowdStrike report, look at a CoreView report, and they're doing a really, really sound job in the data collection. And so the cool thing about these reports is they're highly correlated, but then I always give this, from a business owner perspective, because again, if we can't sell, I always go, well, so what, right? Because as MSPs, our job to be successful is to have a transaction. And I don't mean that just monetarily. If we don't have a transaction, we're not protecting our customers. And then that's our fault. So in order to do that effectively, I wanted to kind of get into the mindset of a business owner. And just think about this, because a lot of you out there are business owners, or think about it from the perspective of when you speak to a business owner. But, Scott, let me just ask you, as a business owner, true or false, is making money like a top priority for you, or, and retaining money and like managing money, how critical is that for you?
Without it, I don't exist.
Right. Right. So a lot of times we get focused on the technology when we have to start thinking about how all of this relates to what really is going on in the head of that business owner. And so with that backdrop, Michelle, do you want to just real quick show the results, and we'll continue just real quick here. Okay, so 70-30, glad that the majority of us are asking those questions, because this is really what the heart and soul of what I tried to do with this data, right? And I'm going to ask Jim and Chip as well as business owners, right? When you think about the business, right, you've got to worry about making money and attracting and retaining customers, and then managing cash flow. I would suspect this part of your probably core things that are on your leadership. Once you get past governance, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But what's interesting is not only is the top priority making money, but let's talk about how it relates to security. So one of the really important insights that you can use when you speak to a prospect or customer, say, hey, by the way, and again, you're probably going to have to break this down for them. If you tell a small business owners, let's talk about your governance, they'll probably look at you like, what are you talking about? But if you talk to them in terms of, right, how IT enables the business and how those critical functions and processes relate to that, you bring it down into their terms. Interestingly, two very significant studies from MIT and Tulane show that organizations that care about those things are 20% more profitable. So, Jim, maybe starting with you, when you think about that insight and you think about how maybe things like MFA, the frightening results that we're seeing across all industries are around now 30%, whether it's enterprise, whether it's small business. How does this speak to you in terms of a business conversation?
I mean, I think it needs to be at the core of every business conversation. And you talk about, I mean, first of all, we are private equity backed, right? So I look at, we have a responsibility to make sure that, we're making money for our investors. And, the revenue, we hit revenue targets, we hit profit targets. And we can't do any of that, or we'll be distracted from doing that if we need to deal with a security event that takes us out of commission for a week or 2 weeks. Like right now, like we're gearing up for the end of the quarter. We'll probably close 40% of our total business, signed business, between now and the end of the quarter. I can't even fathom, Andrew, if we were offline and we couldn't work for the next 2 weeks. Like it would be devastating to our results.
Right. And so with what you just said, and again, love for anybody out there to chime in. But if I said to you, Chip, look, let's talk business processes. What business processes, keep the lights on for you guys? What things keep money coming through the door? What applications keep, SaaS alerts running, right? Versus let's talk technology. What things would come to mind?
Well, I mean, if you're asking for us specifically, there are.
You could role play it, by the way, if you don't want to give away that. But
no, I don't mind. There are two core elements to our business. One is obviously our knowledge worker suite, right? Our productivity, office tools, email, and in our case, Slack. We're not a Teams group. We're a Slack group. And then the other, of course, is our development environment itself. And we go to extraordinary lengths to protect both of those and make sure that we simply can't have a breach there. Obviously, we self-monitor those with our own product, and we have the product very finely tuned so that anything that even remotely looks out of line gets caught. But maybe the biggest thing that we do as a business that most small businesses wouldn't do, I hope many of you as MSPs do, we have a dedicated risk committee that is comprised of myself, our compliance officer, Liron, and one of our most senior engineers. You can't pull everybody in the organization into it. Jim is an ad hoc member, but he never shows up because he trusts us, I think.
Yeah, and that's why we have you.
We meet once a week. Yeah, we meet weekly with that committee. And we've been doing that, since the time we were a third the size company we are today. And every week with that committee, we spend a minimum of an hour. Sometimes it runs significantly over, reviewing every single policy, every single system that we have, what we need to do to improve, looking at logs of external penetration testing and threat testing and of our back-end systems. We pour over that and keep very detailed notes and assign tasks to everybody in that group from 1 week to the next to stay on top of it. I think a lot of small businesses could benefit from that kind of a process even if they did it once a quarter. I mean, if you're talking, I always use the example of the family business that owns, they own a half a dozen dry cleaning places and they have 15 knowledge workers and 100 employees. And I use that example because they were once one of my customers, like literally that exact example. But even they can benefit from doing tabletop exercises and just talking through and reviewing the basic stuff. You guys as MSPs absolutely should be doing that, not less than monthly. I don't know that everyone needs to do it weekly, but not less than monthly, and just reviewing the whole landscape, the ever-changing landscape of what's going on from a security perspective with systems. And then how does that apply to all the customers that you have? The same thing then cooks down to your customers. To me, that's, we harp on MFA because it's the number one thing that people could do to stop breaches, and they just don't do it. But in terms of really advancing your own company's reduction in risk, your strength profile in defending the really valuable stuff, which is, what's valuable? It's your intellectual property, right? For you guys at MSPs, it's your customer lists, it's your accounting data, and for your customers, it's their customer list and accounting data. Like, we're all sharing the same things that we're trying to protect, and it seems overkill and redundant. And there's sometimes where you feel like you have nothing new to explore. But what I've discovered, and I think Leron would back me up on this, he's on this committee, there isn't a week that goes by that we don't identify something new that we haven't thought about before. And you're just constantly iterating that process and making it tighter and tighter.
You said something, and again, if anybody has, I'm not, Jim, maybe you can look at chat and see if someone wants to volunteer in the few minutes we have left. And we'll continue this, if it's okay with you, Jim and Chip, into next week.
Yeah.
But Chip, like, again, think about when in the conversations you have with your customers, pretend you couldn't talk about technology, and you have to talk about how they make money, how the bouncing ball of their processes, customers, data moves. Chip, you said something really interesting, and I want to point out something in SaaS alerts. What would it mean if your customers and suppliers and all that information got leaked? And when you look at the SaaS report towards the end, what's interesting is look at the number of alerts in Salesforce. Why are threat actors, and this is something I think a lot of us as MSPs maybe don't really harp on about, this piece of a customer's business. Think about it. Why do threat actors target that? And the last thing I'll say is there's a reason why initial access brokers have exploded in terms of selling credential information. Does that make sense to everybody where I'm going with this? Does anybody, again, MSP wise, want to chime in? And if not, Chip, happy for you to kind of maybe put an exclamation point on this as we close out today's event, because that stood out to me as I started to correlate all of this back together about mission critical systems and how you guys, I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, but buried that toward the end about Salesforce and Slack and all those things. It's really interesting when you pull it all back together, how the threat actors work.
I'll give anyone else a chance to respond before I dive into that, Andrew.
Anybody want to?
Doesn't look like we have any takers.
Well, we got 1 minute left, Chip. So
close us out, Chip.
So I correlate what we do today with what I used to do when I was an MSP all the way back in the early 2000s, even late 90s, when we weren't calling ourselves an MSP then, but effectively we were, right? Everybody was a VAR. And I remember the moment when the whole world started selling backup services on the thesis that if you're a small business and you lose your data, and back then people lost the data because the hard drives went bad and this, that, and the other thing. We're all out there selling them tape drives and tapes and rotation systems, and our guys are going to come into your office and make sure it all works and check it once a month. And we did all that because there are studies out there that said small business loses their data, 90% of them are going to go out of business in a year because they can't recover from it. And we're in the exact same spot right now. The conversation with the customer is, what happens if your your competitors, if you're ex-employees, if other actors, that don't have your core best interests at heart as a business, what happens if they get a hold of your data? And that's the reason that you've got to take every step that you possibly can to secure it, including being aware of insider threats and looking at how that data is moving around. And Andrew, I'm trying to tie this back to the Salesforce piece. I mean, I think one of the big reasons that we've seen such an increase in the SASI data on the Salesforce side is because we cover a lot more data sharing events there than we did a year ago. And the data is what the hackers are after. So we're seeing so much more activity around, those alerts. So I don't think we certainly didn't intentionally bury it, and I don't
No,
take it
I was,
that way.
I was
But
joking
you're right.
around with you.
We maybe didn't explain it enough as to why it's why it's become more prominent. But you made a comment, and I want to follow up on one comment that you made, which is the access brokers, the guys that are doing this for sale. This is a specialized business across the board. You have a whole group of hackers that all they do all day long is focus on getting a credential. And it's not like they're fully integrated, businesses the way we think of hackers. They don't take that and go and work with that new credential and spend the time to spearfish or do whatever else they need to do to get in the organization. They just sell it. And they've built tools so that they can harvest, hundreds to thousands of identities and credentials a month, and then sell them. And then the next guy does his piece. He gets in there and says, oh, you know what? I've got this domain that I've compromised and I'm moving laterally. And, I've got 3 different people successfully fished in this environment, and away we go. So that's how it works today. And explaining those things to your customers about how it puts their data at risk, I think, is what helps the successful sale of the MSP as the leader in security.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just think about your own, like your PSA as an example, or HubSpot, right? With all your customer data. This is, as Chip said, the initial access brokers, all they're doing, right? If they got into your manage, your your Autotask, et cetera, right? They want those naming conventions because they know if they can get those naming conventions and all that information about your customer, they can create all sorts of campaigns to get this, from spear phishing that lead to business, compromise, because they understand who the customer is, the supplier, and we could go on and on and on. We'd probably spend another 2 hours on this. But anyway,
Andrew, what you put together is so good. I think we should pick this back up next week.
Okay.
Right. And really.
Hey guys, I got to jump. I've got a
first.
call waiting.
Thanks, Jim. Chip.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim.
So, as usual, we ran out of time.
It was a great call.
Yeah, exactly. So great stuff. And I guess we'll see everybody next week.
Look forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, bye.
Everyone.